Welcome to those of you who are joining us today for our webinar, and we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you to all of you who are introducing yourselves in the chat box if you want to put your name and your organization. Also, if you'd like to share that with everyone, please select all panelists and attendees, so that way everybody on the webinar can see who else is there. Feel free to do that if you're comfortable. Otherwise, just the panelists will be able to see that. And we are going to get started in just a minute. We are recording this webinar today, and want to make sure that you are also all comfortable with that, knowing that you have a choice about putting your information in the chat box. Let's see. Okay. And one more thing to note is that if you all would like some live transcript options, I believe that should be, okay. So if anybody on the call wants live transcripts at the bottom of their screen, just know that you can click on the CC where it says live transcript, and you will have text scrolling if that's something that works and is helpful for you. Just know that that's available. It's something new for Violence Free Colorado to be using, so we know that it's not 100%, but it definitely is, it can be helpful for some folks. So let me know if you have any tech questions. My name is Brandy Waliga, and I'm with Violence Free Colorado. I'm the Technical Assistance and Training Specialist. We are recording this webinar today, so just know that we'll send out the recording with the follow-up information a couple days, sometime later this week. If you have any technical assistance questions or tech questions, please type them. Oh, thank you. I got a message from Nancy about my volume. Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so hopefully, is this a little bit better for volume? Let's see. Just checking. So hopefully my volume's a little bit better for everyone. Again, I'm Brandy Waliga from Violence Free Colorado, and want to introduce our monthly webinar, which is about brain injury. And Ellen from the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado is going to share a ton of information about brain injuries, and will be able to answer your questions. So if you would like to, if you have any questions, feel free to type those in the chat box. Also, if you have any tech questions, please type those in the chat box. If you want everybody to see your question, please select all panelists and attendees on the drop-down menu in the chat box, so that way everyone will be able to see the questions being asked. We'll also read those aloud if that isn't the case. And one more reminder that right at the bottom, there is the option for the live transcript where it says CC live transcript. If that's something you'd like to use, just know that's accessible. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ellen to introduce herself further. Thank you, Ellen, for being here. And we're so excited to hear about brain injuries. Yay. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, I'm Ellen Kordonowy, and I provide outreach for the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, also known as BIAC. So we are a statewide nonprofit that offers free support services to survivors of brain injury and their loved ones, family members, and professionals. So I've been with BIAC for about 3 years now. I was initially one of our Resource Navigators, and then I transitioned into this outreach role. So I am offering awareness on brain injury and the services that we offer, and how we can be a resource for the community and survivors across Colorado. So I will be touching on BIAC at the end of the presentation, and how you all can refer to us. And like Brandy said, feel free to type any questions in the chat, and we can, make it a conversation. So we'll get into it. And we will be following up with this PowerPoint that you all can have, to reference in the future as well. All right, so I'm not going to play this. This is just a little video that we have. It does a cute kind of overview of brain injury, but this is information on our website, but I'm just going to skip over it for now. So when we are talking about brain injury, we are talking about acquired brain injury. And there are two prongs to that. So we have traumatic brain injury, also known as TBI, and those are injuries that happen externally to the head. So, you know, most commonly we think of TBIs from falls and assaults and car accidents. And then on the other side, we have non-traumatic brain injuries. And those are injuries that happen inside of the brain. So that includes strokes and lack of oxygen to the brain, which, you know, is very common for survivors of domestic violence. So this is just something that we want to highlight, because a lot of times people just think that a brain injury means TBI, but that, you know, we want to make sure people know that it includes the non-traumatic brain injury piece. So classification of TBIs. This isn't necessarily something that you are going to know when you're working with your clients, but something that we just want to you know, highlight is a concussion is a mild TBI, and you don't have to lose consciousness to sustain a concussion. And a lot of times people don't necessarily understand the severity of a concussion. You know, they think, oh, I just, you know, was seeing stars, or I was just really out of it for, you know, a couple hours. But and sometimes when people don't know the severity of what you know, a concussion is, they never seek treatment, or they you know, immediately, let's say they're back on the football field, and it's a lot easier for somebody to sustain that second concussion when the first concussion never fully healed. And then I also do want to mention that the majority of TBIs, about 75% of TBIs, are mild. So this is really just kind of looking at where these different functions lie within the brain. And you can see here the frontal lobe, that's where our executive functions lie. So those are kind of like our adult thinking skills with organizing and emotional regulation and planning. And our frontal lobe is most susceptible to sustaining injuries just because the location of where it's at on our head. So it's very common that we see executive function deficits in survivors, which includes that emotional regulation. So some TBI stats specifically. There's a couple different age groups that are most susceptible to sustaining a TBI. We have children 0 to 4 years old, and that is due to abuse in the home. And then we have teenagers 15 to 19 years old, and that's just, you know, teenagers learning how to drive and engaging in, you know, different risky behavior. And then we have adults 65 years and older, which that is due to falls. So this number at the bottom here, an estimated 2.8 million people in the US sustain a TBI annually. So that is information that we gathered, or the CDC gathered, through hospital discharge data. So, you know, we can only imagine how many people never went to the hospital or never sought medical treatment following their brain injury. And, you know, there's a variety of reasons why that might be. One, you know, maybe somebody's in an unsafe environment and just doesn't want to seek help. Maybe somebody's doesn't have health insurance, or they are undocumented, or they just don't, you know the severity of the injury. So the number at the bottom we think is much higher than what the CDC has accounted for. So some Colorado specific data. So over 500,000 adults in Colorado have sustained a brain injury. This number, it's pretty high, but it's also kind of up to par with national data. There are a lot of, risky sports opportunities in Colorado. We know that. And then there are also a lot of rural areas that lack the education on preventing and also treating brain injuries. So, a lot of education needs to be done. I think this is like an ongoing goal for BIAC and also brain injury in Colorado. And this is why we are, providing these kinds of trainings.
Ellen, this is Brandy. I just want to chime in. We're getting a little bit of spottiness with some of the audio. I'm not sure if there's anything on your end in terms of microphone that you could tweak. I've tried to check on things on my end. There's some points that are smooth and some points that just get a little choppy. So I just wanted to let you know. I wasn't sure if there was anything that could be tweaked.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you. I could change my microphone to, does this help at all? Did that change anything?
It changes just the tone of your voice, but you could try it and we could see if that smooths it out.
Okay. Well, let me know again if I'm going in and out.
Thank you.
But we'll try this for now. I just switched my microphone.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go a few slides and see how it goes. Thank you.
Thanks. So a multitude of loss. So, when somebody sustains a brain injury, their brain and body are kind of working in overtime to repair the tissues and damage that has been caused. Let me just make sure in this chat. Okay, this seems better. Thank you. So there are some parts of the brain that can't necessarily be repaired, or they need to take more time to be repaired. And they say a brain injury is like a fingerprint, that every injury is different, depending on any pre-injury history, also a lot of the circumstances that the individual is in before and after and during, they sustain a brain injury. So it's across the board on how it can affect somebody. But it is safe to say that there are oftentimes some sort of life shift after the brain injury. So whether that be some functional abilities, like some physical or executive functioning skills that might be affected. We also have some neurological changes that happen. Maybe somebody's self-awareness is totally skewed. Maybe their language and communication, they're having trouble with that. Maybe, for the life roles piece, maybe somebody is used to being the breadwinner of their family for, 40 years, and then they sustain a brain injury and they are out of work for a couple months or a year. And, that can really change someone's self-identity and their family and their life role. And you can just kind of see that that might lead to some other kinds of mental health issues. So there is an increased risk for mental health issues following a brain injury. There's also a higher risk for substance abuse because people are, trying to figure out how to cope with their brain injury and their symptoms, and they maybe turn to substance abuse or substances. And there's higher risk for homelessness and criminal activity. So, they say, so a brain injury is an invisible injury. So it's oftentimes, we don't necessarily know when we see people if they've had a brain injury or not. And the work that, the attendees here do, I think a lot of it, unless you all are screening for a brain injury, it's coming up, it's being disclosed from your client. And a lot of times people don't have those medical records to rely on. So, that's why we are here to provide some accommodation strategies and support for an individual to learn where they're at this point and how they can move forward. Okay, so brain injury and mental health. So a brain injury can damage the way, or I'm sorry, a brain injury can change the way people feel and express their emotions, and that can be due to the injury itself, or it can be how somebody is handling, life after brain injury. So it's extremely common for people to experience some mental health issues. You can see here that almost half of adults with a brain injury who have no pre-injury history of mental health problems will develop mental health problems following the TBI or brain injury. So you can also see here that depression, anxiety, irritability, and anger are the most common mental health diagnoses. And, brain injury presents medically, but it primarily presents itself behaviorally. So a lot of, questions that we receive is about behavior management with survivors of brain injury. And, it can just be difficult for people to kind of accept where they're at. So I kind of mentioned this just in the other slide, but, a lot of times there's a grief and loss process that survivors go through where they, kind of have to let go a little bit about who they were before the injury to accept where they're at now. So many people just want to get back to where they were before the injury. And, there's a lot of pressure on why can I not just get better? With that, it's kind of about accepting where somebody's at and figuring out what works for them and taking that moving forward. So brain injury and victimization. So, we've kind of talked about how a brain injury can, skew somebody's cognitive abilities, right? So that can also change somebody's perception on the world and perception of situations. Let's say that somebody was stopped in the street downtown Denver because they had, they were slurring their words, or they kind of had a gait in their walk. Let's say a police officer had stopped them and asked, what's going on? Are you okay? It seems like you're maybe under the influence. And the survivor, might be a little taken aback that was just brought up to them. And it can be difficult to advocate on behalf of themselves. So that might just lead to, feeling like, why are you talking to me about this? And you can just kind of see that might lead to like kind of in a situation where the survivor is a little angry and has trouble explaining that their speech is slurred because of their brain injury. So, you can just kind of lead to see that maybe that's a kind of a situation could lead to more trouble if the police officer isn't understanding what they're saying or doesn't believe them. And, you can kind of see how that might lead to an increase in criminal, activity. So what else do I want to touch on here? Okay. So how is brain injury treated? A lot of times the treatment is based off of the symptoms that the survivor of brain injury is experiencing. So, let's say somebody is having trouble communicating and expressing their emotions and their thoughts and understanding what you're telling them, then maybe they would be a good candidate for speech and language therapy. And this is a lot of, information that we can provide survivors, depending on what they're experiencing. We can help kind of guide them in different, appropriate directions. We at BIAC, we are not medical providers, but we do have, the majority of our staff are certified brain injury specialists, and a lot of us have backgrounds in different social work and healthcare, and so we cannot necessarily say this is what somebody needs, but we can provide them the options and, walk them through those options and how people can get connected to different providers under their specific insurance. And, there's kind of a lot of conversation around what's going to be best for the individual. So some general treatment principles. I just wanted to put this in here because I think it does a good job of kind of breaking down what's helpful when working with survivors of brain injury. And, really survivors of brain injury are having a brain injury diagnosis does not exclude somebody from receiving appropriate care. Sometimes we hear from survivors that their mental health provider turned them away after they disclose that they have a brain injury. And that should not be the case. I think a lot of times maybe the provider might not feel comfortable with treating somebody with a brain injury, but that should definitely not be the case. And it's something that we suggest constantly is, getting connected with a mental health therapist. I think also the education piece is so huge for survivors. If somebody was never, formally diagnosed with that brain injury, and, there can be a lot of pressure on that person. And then that might kind of lower somebody's self-esteem if they continually forget, are having those memory issues. And sometimes people can be hard on themselves and not understanding fully what's going on. And then if you were to bring up some brain injury, information to them, sometimes it can kind of put the pieces together on, oh, maybe there's something else going on here. It's not just me messing up, it's because of my brain injury. And I think that the education piece for survivors and also their loved ones and family members is incredibly helpful in understanding where somebody's at and, kind of putting a name to what somebody's going through.
Ellen, we have one question in the chat.
Yes.
The question is, if a victim was abused 20 years ago and has symptoms worsening over the years, is it possible that it might have been an untreated brain injury? For example, the victim now experiences right eye, blurred vision, mild dizziness, migraines, anxiety, confusion.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, in the ideal world, everyone would get treated immediately after their brain injury. And so oftentimes people, never receive that treatment. So it is possible that those symptoms have gotten worse, definitely. Especially with aging with the brain injury, the brain injury can kind of lead people to be a little bit more susceptible to other, healthcare needs and issues. And if there was symptoms that were never, acknowledged, yes, they definitely, could be getting worse as time goes on. And that's not to say that, starting some sort of treatment now wouldn't help. It would definitely help with relieving some of those symptoms. I hope that helped.
Yes, great, thank you. And I think it's also sounds very important for folks to think about when they're supporting survivors, that sometimes we don't think about telling our doctors maybe something that happened a long time ago, or maybe, thinking about abuse in terms of that lens of, oh, this could be impacting me now. So yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Rhonda.
Yeah, that's a great point. And some of our clients, sometimes they call us, immediately from hospital discharge. And then there are survivors that call us, 20 plus years post-injury. And they're just putting the pieces together that, what I've been experiencing is because of my brain injury. So I think that there is, it's definitely part of the conversation when you're, kind of administering that intake or that first session. And I know that this is something that you all probably see pretty commonly, and it can be, you know, very triggering, and there's a lot of trauma attached to, you know, to sustaining brain injuries. So, you know, I know that a lot of it is also based on the relationship that you have with your clients, and if they feel comfortable talking to you, but at least kind of putting the idea out there can get things, you know, moving. And we also will be touching really briefly on screening tools and the importance of screening for a brain injury. Okay, so some super general common signs and symptoms that some people may experience. The cognitive abilities like attention, concentration, the memory issues, that's all just very, very common. We also have some communication symptoms and physical symptoms with the sensitivities to different stimuli. Very common. A lot of times survivors wear sunglasses, you know, all day, every day. Sometimes people wear little earplugs, you know, that can kind of dim out external noise. So, you know, just kind of integrating those little tricks to somebody's daily routine can really change how successful somebody may feel in their day-to-day life. So specifically, some challenges that we see for survivors of domestic violence. So, you know, very much with kind of looking forward and trying to plan out, and let's say, you know, an escape plan, that can just feel completely overwhelming for somebody that, you know, doesn't even have a brain injury. And it can be really difficult to remember and kind of think of the consequences that might come with it. So I think it's very important for you all who are working with survivors to provide that extra support. You know, we are always encouraging survivors to carry a notebook and a calendar around with them and, you know, take notes during sessions. And I think sometimes that might not be possible for people that don't feel like they have the ability and the safety to be writing things down. But that can really help aid memory, and it can kind of lay out steps for people to take when, you know, wanting to make that jump. Also with, you know, keeping a plan a secret with impulse control, that can be really difficult to kind of keep quiet about, even if somebody wasn't even planning on sharing, you know, anything remotely personal, and then they accidentally, it kind of just slips out. You know, that can be very common. And the initiation is also a big part of it. You know, those kind of beginning steps can feel really overwhelming to people, and they just don't want to do it. So I would say, you know, kind of walking people through those beginning steps of even trying to create a plan, you know, can be really helpful, and breaking things down into, you know, basically bite-sized pieces for somebody to, you know, understand and digest is a big part of it as well too. And I know this is something that you all, you know, do pretty frequently. So if anyone has any, you know, thoughts or suggestions or something that's worked for them and their clients, you know, feel free to share that. I think that would be super helpful for, you know, everybody in this training. So screening for brain injury. This is very important just to gather more information about an individual. You know, it also, like I've been mentioning before, can kind of put the pieces together for a survivor as well. And after screening for a brain injury, you get a better idea about where somebody might be struggling. And then it's easier for you to integrate some strategies into the treatment that you provide. So really, the importance of screening for brain injury is to gather, a bigger picture of the individual, and, providing that education. And then also there might be additional support services like getting connected to BIAC. It can just kind of open some doors for understanding somebody's situation a little bit better. So we at BIAC, everybody that comes to us, it's all based off self-report. We do not require any medical documentation, but we do have one program. It's a self-management skill building program where we do administer a screening tool just so we can get a better understanding of where that individual is at in their injury history. So we utilize the Ohio State University TBI identification method. But we know that does not, encapsulate survivors of non-traumatic brain injury. So there are a couple different, non-TBI screening tools like the HELPS tool. And I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with these. Feel free to jump in. Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat quick. And yes, I will be providing this PowerPoint to Brandy after, and she will share with everybody. I'm sorry about that. I totally just interrupted what was happening. Oh yeah, the HELPS tool. And I'm forgetting what other one there is, but that's something that I will follow up with as well about those screening tools.
It looks like we have another question, Ellen.
Okay.
How do people access appropriate medical testing to determine whether they have a brain injury? It seems that with DV, it is sometimes difficult to convince medical providers that strangulation or a DV assault warrants more thorough care. Also, is BIAC able to help advocate for a survivor who is seeking additional medical care? So a few questions in there.
Yeah, those are great questions. Can BIAC advocate for people to seek, adequate medical care? Not really, just because of the position that we are in as a nonprofit. We can be there to, take notes for the survivor and maybe fill in some gaps, but we don't have any, necessarily a say legally in people's medical care. But we can provide some background information of how it's affecting somebody and, providing that research behind how the brain injury affects people medically. And then the question about, other kinds of medical screening. So neuropsychological evaluation is pretty common and something that we do encourage people to receive if they're looking for more concrete, tangible information. So if they were never, diagnosed formally, somebody could get a neuropsychological evaluation, which basically just looks at the impairment in the brain. So it can kind of figure out, where somebody is struggling, let's say, emotionally or cognitively. It can kind of highlight those areas, which in turn helps, provide some information about course of treatment.
Thanks, Ellen. And we have another question about, can our clients access your services remotely from across the state? And what can you offer them remotely or for no cost?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, we provide support across the state. Our main office resides in Denver, but we have remote staff across the state, and everything is currently still virtual right now. We're hoping to be able to meet with clients again, come summer, but we just aren't completely sure yet. So yes, everything is virtual right now. And when it's not COVID, we can meet clients in the community and work on, you know, some tangible tasks like helping fill out, you know, paperwork or an application, or kind of helping people, walk people through building a to-do list and organizing files and, you know, organizing and managing a planner and a calendar and all that. So, you know, hopefully we'll be back with that soon, but for now it's still virtual, and all of our services are free of charge, and there is no insurance requirements or medical documentation necessary. Anyone can just call our main line or submit a referral through our website, and they will speak to one of our resource navigators. And then we can just, basically we conduct like a 15-minute phone intake, and you know, just to gather some relevant contact information and injury history. And then we talk about what's going on with the survivor at that moment, and, you know, where do their needs lie. Sometimes people don't know what they need, but they just want to give us a call, and, you know, they're just excited to hear about an organization that, you know, works with survivors. So a lot of it is kind of navigating where somebody's at, and we are happy to work with you all as well. Our resource navigators really enjoy working with other providers kind of within that support system. So there's, you know, just a couple different voices there for the individual. And, you know, if we can help out in any way with, you know, the efficiency of the services that you are offering, we are there. So let's say if you have a meeting with the survivor and you kind of are noticing a pattern that survivor is continuously, you know, not remembering what's going on in the session, that's something that maybe we could attend the session with you all, and we could take notes on behalf of the survivor. You know, just kind of providing a little bit of supplementary support for that individual.
Thanks, Ellen. That's great to know that you guys are such a great resource. And there's always the importance to figure out with, especially for community-based advocates, that there's some nuances with confidentiality. And so, you know, that's always something that, you know, if programs have questions about confidentiality and having other folks in a session, that's always something you can reach out to Violence Free Colorado if you have questions about that too. It looks like we have another question in the box. Do you offer support groups for individuals affected or diagnosed with TBI, or have a resource list to provide?
Yes. You know what, let's just jump up really quick to those slides. Really. So here, these are just some slides on accommodation strategies that you all could utilize. Just at the bottom here, you know, patients, they're pretty basic accommodation strategies, but they really can help change the course of that session. But I'm going to just skip over these for a moment, just so I can get to BIAC info. Okay, yeah, these are just, there's a ton on here, and I get that this is kind of like overwhelming, but so BIAC, yes. So our resource navigation, this is our kind of fundamental support program. So again, if anyone calls our main line or fills out the referral form, they will talk to one of our resource navigators. And this is something that is going to be most helpful for you all to know that we have this available. We have free classes and workshops for survivors. So, you know, it was so great when we could be in person and people could kind of have a socialization opportunity. But right now they are all virtual, and I think that there are some benefits to that because we're able to reach, you know, more people across the state. Whereas if we had one class, you know, in Fort Collins, there's only so many people that can attend. So right now we have about 5 classes going on virtually, and they are all free of charge. we just ask that people register beforehand, and they can do that either by calling our main line or registering on our website. But right now we have some classes like Tai Chi, there's an adaptive yoga class, a grief and loss group to kind of, you know, be at peace with who you were and where you're at now. There's also a mindfulness class going on and brain injury basics classes. So that's a great option. And then yes, we also have statewide support groups. There's a huge list on our website, and you know, we're happy to mail that information to people or email it, you know, whatever's easiest. But right now they are still all virtual, which again, I think, you know, opens up some doors for people to, you know, and their accessibility to attend something like this. And this is something that we're always suggesting that people try out a couple different groups, because, you know, there's a lot of valuable and meaningful information that comes from talking with people that have been through something somewhat similar. So there are groups, you know, there are some different kind of specific groups. There's groups specific to TBI survivors. There's groups that are specific to survivors of stroke. There are women and girls only groups. There are caregiver and parent groups. So kind of across the board. And I wonder, if anyone's familiar with Pink Concussions. They have a bunch of Facebook groups, private Facebook groups, and I'm not sure if there's anything specific to survivors of domestic violence, but you know, I think there could be a good opportunity there when the group is all, you know, it's woman-based. Not that men are not involved or affected, but you know, there's a lot of different options. So I hope that that's helpful.
Are the classes and workshops offered in Spanish too?
So we do have a brain injury basics class that's in Spanish. And that is all we have right now, actually, unfortunately. But we are always looking for more opportunities to expand, you know, what we are offering for survivors. So if there is, you know, if we see that there's interest, we would love to set something up. So if anyone wants to reach out to me specifically about that, feel free. We do have a couple, you know, staff members that are bilingual and can provide that support in Spanish as well. And then we oftentimes take on or utilize translation services as well for other languages. So this is a screenshot of our website. This is a resource directory that we have. And you can see here on the right-hand side, there's all these different categories. So this is a great place for, you know, you all to utilize, as well as community members. And it just provides some information about different facilities and providers across Colorado that have experience working with survivors. So this is a great place, you know, to access resources as well. And since we're on this whole BIAC train, let me just show the referral form. So I totally understand, and BIAC understands, that survivors have been through a lot and they don't necessarily want their information just sent out there. So there are a couple different options to, you know, submitting a referral with us. And if somebody's in that boat where they don't feel comfortable for you to fill out this form, if you want to call together, if you want to call with the client together at our main line, you can definitely do that. And it can be, you know, kind of a conversation between both of you and one of our staff members. So I think, you know, sometimes that comes into play when people, you know, are skeptical and just, you know, there's a lot of issues with trust, and, you know, there's all those different kinds of feelings for people. So if somebody feels more comfortable calling together with you, please do that. you can also mention on this referral form that there's a question about who should be contacted first, and you can mention yourself. So we would contact, the professional instead of contacting the survivor. So this form takes under, 5 minutes to fill out. Once we receive the form, we reach out to either you or the survivor in about 7 to 10 days of receiving the referral. And I'm happy to mail any BIAC or some BIAC material to anyone that's interested as well. So if, this comes up while you're in a meeting with somebody, you can show them, you can give them a BIAC rat card, or we have educational pamphlets that, they can have something tangible, hard copy to look at and refer to when you are talking about BIAC. So feel free to just contact me if anyone wants any of those hard copy materials. And we also have those materials, online too, and Brandy will be sending those out with the PowerPoint. So does anyone have any questions at this point? So we have some educational material on our website. We have a quarterly newsletter that people can get either through mail or email. We also have an education consultation program for youth under 21 and their loved ones. So, we work with survivors of all ages, but we do have this specific program for youth under 21. All right, so if anyone has any comments or questions, I think I'm going to leave it on this page. And, I think, so yeah, so now I'm just kind of talking. So if anyone has any other questions or comments, or if this is something that people see, daily in their life, in their work life, if this was helpful, or if I should be covering anything else.
While we're waiting to see if folks have more questions, I think thanks so much, Ellen, for pointing out all these pieces. And it sounds like also that your slides about some of the specific, signs and symptoms to look for is also probably going to be really helpful to folks too. Mm-hmm. Especially these accommodation strategies, even just thinking about things, as well as, sometimes advocates, for example, might not know if someone has experienced a brain injury, or are they experiencing some of the traumatic effects of domestic violence that, we're just not sure where things are falling in terms of how someone's processing or how someone's reacting, So I think having more information is so helpful. So thanks so much for sharing all of this.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And do you all have a formal screening process for brain injury, or does it come up just in conversation?
That's a great question. I wonder if anybody who's on the webinar, if anybody has in their program, if they're doing any kind of specific brain injury screening, since there's programs from all across the state. Let's see. We have one that says, definitely look forward to receiving the slides for further information. I would also like to say that many times screening for brain injury is not routine. Okay. Yeah. I think that might be common, actually. Yeah. Another person says no formal screening process. Someone else saying this is usually further assessed when this is shared by a client. So if the survivor is saying, hey, X, Y, and Z happened to me and I might have a head injury, a brain injury, then maybe that's what starts the conversation.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing things that are happening in your programs. One person saying, we ask about the risk factors, strangulation or physical force used, but don't specifically ask if they've had one in the past.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, well, I'm happy to follow up with more information on screening available. I think, I think it is definitely helpful, but it's also, obviously very common and with the work that you all are doing. So, I'm interested to learn more about how screening for programs like what you all offer and how it benefits you all as well. So I will follow up with some information about that.
Great. Thank you, Ellen. I think that, again, I think even just learning about some of these pieces, learning about whether it's accommodation strategies, learning about symptoms, that also could open the door for advocates to understand, what to just ask more questions about when it's appropriate, and when that fits for that survivor, asking what are they struggling with in the moment, and asking, if there's any indication of things that might have led to a brain injury, then it can open the door with more language, it sounds like, learning some of these pieces.
Yes, totally. Totally. I'm going to stop sharing now. Well, great. Thank you all so much for being here and, providing feedback and asking questions. That's so helpful. And we are so appreciative of everything that you all do. I know that my staff is very familiar with Violence Free Colorado and some of the other agencies that you all wrote down. So thank you for sharing that. Again, if you all have any questions or want to troubleshoot different resources with us, feel free to give us a call or contact me directly. And we just want to make sure that you all can utilize us, and are familiar with it.
Yes, thanks so much, Ellen. And if anybody has a last minute question you want to type in the chat, feel free. And I'll also remind you that after the webinar, there is a quick survey. So if you could fill that out, it gives Ellen some feedback. It also gives us at Violence Free Colorado some feedback if there's other topics you're interested in, because we want to make sure that these monthly webinars are something that are really helpful for all of you. And also mark your calendars. April 13th is our next monthly webinar, and we will have the Advocates of Wrap County's social change program will be the topic for April. So look out for an email about that. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. And again, big thanks to Ellen, and Ellen's contact information will also be in the slides, so know that you'll have that resource as well as all of the other ways to contact BIAC, and that will be in follow-up email. And thank you all for attending, and thanks for your great questions today.
Awesome. Thanks for setting this up, Brandy. Thank you all so much.
Great.
Have a good rest of your day.